In 14 years of embalming, only one body ever made me check the door handle twice. From the inside. The first time the sound came, I was tightening the strap on the gurney. A sharp metallic tick snapped through the prep room. Short, high, and clean. The kind of sound a coin makes when it hits stainless steel and settles. I glanced at the clock over the door. 2:13 a.m. We were short-staffed, so I'd picked up the extra night. My daughter had a school recital that morning. I watched a video of it on my phone in the break room. Then I came back in here. This room is not big. One stainless table set at a 15-degree angle. Overhead surgical lamp humming with that low electrical buzz. Arterial pump on the cart already primed and sitting at 0.45 psi. Bottles of fluid on the shelf lined by color. Clear, then pink, then that cloudy yellow mix for harder cases. The cooler sits opposite the table. Insulated door, heavy latch. You get used to the feel of the seal breaking when you pull it. I checked the chart first. Female, 72. Time of death written as 11:32 p.m., initialed by the ER physician. Below that, someone had crossed out an earlier time. Same date, different numbers. I noticed it. I did not stop on it. Verify identity. Confirm time of death. Inspect livor. Evaluate rigor, I said under my breath. I talk through the checklist sometimes. It keeps my head where it needs to be. When I opened the cooler door, cold air rolled out across my arms. Thermometer on the wall read 38 degrees. That is where it should be. Her gurney was on the second rail. White sheet, toe tag tied right. I pulled her out, locked the wheels, and peeled the sheet back. She had that look a lot of them have. Not peaceful, just empty. Jaw slightly slack, gray at the lips. Rigor should peak around 6 to 12 hours. She had been gone according to the amended time for just over 14. Her arms were stiff, fingers curled but not locked. Neck had some give. That fit the numbers. I paused there for a second and thought about my daughter. I had her drawing folded in my locker. A stick figure with a tie standing next to a piano. Daddy at work was written across the top. My hand went back to the chart. No infectious disease flags, no autopsy hold, just cardiac arrest after prolonged resuscitation. I transferred her to the table. You learn to feel weight, not just see it. Most bodies settle into the metal the same way. This one didn't. When I slid her across, her torso seemed to lean back toward the gurney. The center of mass felt wrong, like it wanted to roll off the angle. I adjusted the table tilt and centered her shoulders. Pressed down on the hip. She stayed where I put her, for a moment. Then the tick came again. Same pitch, same spot. From the drainage tray under the table this time. I looked down. Nothing had dripped yet. No tools in the tray. Just that sound hanging in the air, a second too long. I told myself it was metal cooling. Sometimes the room does that. Steel shifts. You learn not to chase every noise. I started the face set. Close the eyes, support the lids, work on the mouth. You know the drill if you do this job. Her skin had the right temperature for cooler storage. Firm, but not icy. Color matched the documented livor spots. Deep along the back of the neck and shoulders, light on the cheek. I went to set the mandible. Left hand under the jaw, right hand at the chin, standard pressure. When I raised the mandible, a dry click came from her throat. Not a wet gurgle, not deep, just a single crisp sound. I stopped, held that position, listened. The room hummed. Compressor in the cooler, overhead light, nothing else. Trapped air, I said out loud. It happens. You move tissue, gas escapes. You do not make a note every time. I finished the mouth closure. Support, needle injector, wire set. Nothing out of place. Then I repositioned her torso. Hand on the sternum, one on the shoulder. I eased her a little higher on the table to improve drainage. There was a delay in the movement. My hands pushed first. Her body followed a split second later, as if the tissue decided to comply after the fact. It was smooth, too smooth for normal postmortem settling. I felt my jaw clench once. Then I let it go. That felt wrong, I thought. I should have stopped there. I checked myself. The table angle was still 15 degrees. Brakes were locked. No fluid on the surface. Nothing under the wheels. I stepped back from the table, pulled my gloves tighter, and reached for the artery set. Scalpel, aneurysm hook, tissue forceps, hemostats. Each tool where it always is. The tick hit again. This time it landed exactly as my hand touched the metal tray. One note, high. Then silence. I looked straight at the tray. Empty, dry, no drops, no contact points. If you work this job long enough, you learn what to ignore. You also learn what your gut is trying to tell you. Mine was not sure yet. I took a breath. It caught halfway down. I forced it the rest of the way in and let it back out. Identity confirmed, I said quietly. I read her name. Said it once. It is a small thing I do. They feel less like inventory that way. Rigor in the arms matched what I would expect at 14 hours. Elbows resisted flexion, then gave with slow, even resistance. Fingers stayed curled. Neck rotation had limited range, but moved predictably. I checked lever again. It had fixed along the back the way it should after that many hours in one position. No blanching when I pressed. Another box ticked. I should have felt reassured right there. The numbers lined up. The chart matched the body. That is what we look for. But the weight on the table still felt off. Her torso seemed to favor the right side. I nudged her shoulders again. She shifted, then eased back a fraction when my hands lifted. It was small enough to dismiss. So I did. I rolled the pump cart closer and checked the gauge again. 0.45 psi. That is safe for her size. I checked the fluid mix. 2 parts arterial fluid, 1 part water. Standard cosmetic mix for an open casket case. The toe tag brushed my wrist as I moved around the table. I looked at it again. Same name. Same 11:32 p.m., time of death. Under the printed line through the paper, the faint marks of earlier ink. Different numbers. Someone had rewritten it at least once. That happens, I told myself. They correct times. They sync records. It does not always mean anything. Another tick rang out. I checked the clock. 7 seconds since the last one. Not 6, not 8, 7. I listened. Waited for the next one. Counted in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On 7 it came again. Same pitch, same spot. I moved my hand over the tray. No tools touched it. Glove hovered half an inch above the steel. The next tick landed as my fingers passed over the center. I pulled my hand back. It stopped. For most people, this is where the horror starts. For us, this is routine. Bodies make noise. Pipes make noise. Buildings change temperature and metal follows. You learn that early, or you do not last. Still, something was out of phase with the expected timeline. Her rigor, her weight, her amended time of death. That metronome tick that seemed to answer my movements, not the room. I should have walked out and brought someone else in. Instead, I adjusted the lamp, centered the beam on her chest, and reached for the scalpel. The room hummed. The needle on the pump gauge sat at 0. And somewhere under the steel down, near the empty drainage tray, the counting waited for me to move again. The needle on the gauge was still sitting at 0 when I turned back to her. Under the table, that same metallic tick hit again. 7 seconds. Then silence. I checked the chart one more time. Somewhere between the ER and us, they had corrected the record. The amended time of death was 11:27 a.m. the previous day. By the time I started the arterial injection, it had been exactly 15 hours. 15 hours is safe. Whatever the heart did or did not do, it was over. That is what the books say. I hung the primary bottle on the IV pole. Arterial fluid cavity, not yet. 2-to-1 mix. About a gallon prepared for her size. I set the pump to 0.45 psi. Not high, not low. Consistent with what we use here in Tennessee for open casket cases. The room was the same color it always is at night. Too white, too flat. The overhead lamp washed everything in a hard, steady glare. I slid my hand under her neck to adjust the head block. Skin felt firmer than before. Cool, but not as cold as it should have been. I told myself the room had warmed up. The wall thermometer still read 38 degrees. I cannulated the right carotid, scalpel, blunt dissection, aneurysm hook under the vessel, clamp. I slipped the arterial tube into place and tightened the ligature. No tremor in my hands. Not yet. All right, I said to myself. 15 hours, this is safe. I eased the pump switch up. The motor hummed, low, steady. Then the tone dipped like it hit back pressure. It sounded wrong. Not like fluid moving through slack tissue. More like it was pushing against a living artery. I stared at the gauge. Needle hovered at 0.5, then nudged higher. 0.52. 0.53. Come on, I muttered. It should not fight like that. Her left hand lay at her side, fingers curled inward. On the first full pump cycle, the fingers tightened a fraction. On the second, they released. I watched for another cycle. Pump, tone dip, fingers curl, release. That was not rigor easing, not the way I have seen it thousands of times. I turned the pressure down a hair. 0.4. The tone steadied a little. Her fingers stopped moving. I could have called it coincidence right there. I almost did. My jaw clenched. I forced it loose. I checked her forehead with the back of my glove. We had started at 2:13 a.m. It was now 2:27 a.m. She felt warmer than she had when I first moved her from the cooler. Not by a lot. Enough that I noticed. Rigor should not back down in this pattern. At 15 hours, it starts to ease, but slowly, over hours, not minutes. Here, the stiffness in her arms felt less than it had 20 minutes ago. That was the first real crack in the numbers. I put a gloved hand flat against her sternum, pressed. The chest gave under my palm softer than before. I told myself again that I was overthinking the resuscitation note. They had tried on her for 40 minutes. They gave her enough drugs to sink 2 people. That does things to tissue. I leaned in to check her eyes. Corneas were still cloudy, pupils fixed, no reflex to the light. Then I saw it. At the outer corner of her right eye, a tiny line of fluid formed. A tear. It welled, then ran a short path down toward the temple. The air in that room is dry. We keep it cool and controlled. There's no reason for fresh moisture to collect there once circulation is done. My breath hitched once. I swallowed it down. Trapped fluid, I told myself. Gravity, that's all. The pump kept humming. The fluid in the bottle should have moved in a simple pattern. Down the line, into the body, out through the drainage. Instead, I watched the surface. When the pump was running, it calmed almost flat. When I shut the switch off for a second to check a clamp, the surface started to swirl inward, forming a slow spiral toward the center. That is backwards. Pressure should agitate, not rest. Beneath the table, the drainage line was clear. I cracked the stopcock. Fluid and blood should have started to mix and trickle into the tray. Nothing came. The line stayed dry. "Come on," I said sharper than I meant to. That was my frustration moment. At the equipment. At the whole thing. I shook the line gently. Nothing. Then I said her name. Out loud. Right over her sternum. "Ma'am, I need you to let go now." The drainage hissed and started. Dark fluid slid down the tube into the tray. It moved as soon as I stopped talking. Another tick hit the tray. Same 7-second spacing. Something was already wrong. I heard the prep room door open behind me. One of the newer assistants stuck his head in. He had that look they all have in their first year. Curious and trying not to let it show. "How's it going in here?" he asked. "Standard case," I said. "Watch your step." He stepped closer, glanced at her face at the sheet at the pump. Then he smiled in that nervous way. "She looks like she's about to sit up," he said. "Don't say that in here," I replied. He laughed too quickly. "Yeah, right. I've got paperwork. Shout if you need me." He left before I could answer. The door latch closed. The room went back to the lamp and the pump and the tick. I picked up the phone on the wall and dialed the night supervisor's extension. It rang. And rang. No answer. I hung up. Listened again. Tick. 7 seconds. Tick. I looked at the flow gauge on the pump. Every time that sound hit, the needle gave a tiny jump. Not when the impeller turned. Not when the pressure changed. Just on the tick. I adjusted the flow rate and tried to ignore it. You cannot stop a case every time something feels off. The work has to get done. But my hand drifted toward the door anyway. I found myself halfway across the room, gloved fingers brushing the metal handle. I stood there, back to the table. Tick behind me, steady as a slow heart. I could have walked out, I thought. I should have. Professionally, I could not name a reason. No one had called me to stop. No findings on the chart said hold. On paper, this was still a normal case. I let go of the handle and went back. That was the moment I hesitated. I checked her forehead again. Still too warm for 38-degree storage and this much time out. My glove picked up a trace of moisture. Her jaw looked set in the way we leave it after we secure it. But there was a slight change at the corners of her mouth. The muscles along the cheek seemed less slack. I went back to work. I adjusted the clamp on the carotid, checked for leaks, watched the colors shift in her hands. Embalming fluid should move liver, but in a slow, predictable way. Here, the mottling on her fingers cleared, then darkened again between pump cycles. I shut the pump off. The bottle's surface started that inward swirl again. The tick kept going. Tick. 7 seconds. Tick. I opened the drainage stopcock wider. Instead of a stronger flow, it slowed. It was like something inside was pushing back. I pressed my palm gently against her left forearm. The tissue under my hand felt like it was tightening, not relaxing. I had done this for 14 years. I had never felt tissue that seemed to answer pressure in real time. I looked at her face again. The tear track on her temple had grown. Another bead of fluid was forming at the corner of the eye. There is a point in every bad case where the science you rely on starts to slip. I was right on that edge. I moved up to adjust her chin, telling myself I just needed to finish the injection and step away. One hand under the jaw, one hand at the point of the chin. Standard touch. As I lifted her head, did not just pivot in my hands. It turned toward me by 3 or 4 degrees, like something inside decided to follow the movement instead of being moved by it. The angle of the ear canal changed. Her nose no longer pointed straight up. It pointed slightly toward my right shoulder. At that exact moment, the pump shut down. Not a fade, not a mechanical sputter. It just stopped. The motor went silent. The gauge dropped to 0. I had not touched the switch. Under the table, the drainage line stopped as well. No drip, no hiss. The entire room went quiet. No compressor, no hum. One final tick rang out from the tray. It landed at the exact moment I let my breath out. One final tick rang out from the tray when my breath left my lungs. Then nothing. No pump, no compressor. Just me, the table, and her. I checked the wall clock without meaning to. 2:39 a.m. 15 hours and some minutes since that amended time of death. Way past any reflex window they taught us in school. I reached for the pump switch out of habit. The toggle was still in the on position. The motor was dead. I checked the outlet. Cord still plugged into the same orange hospital-grade receptacle we always use. The breaker indicator was not tripped. I told myself it was just a mechanical failure. Equipment dies. You swap it out. But the silence had weight to it. Even the hum from the cooler sounded like it was holding its breath. I moved back to her side. Her head was still turned that few degrees toward me, just enough that the angle of her face felt wrong on the table. I put my gloved hand on her forehead again. It should have felt cold by now with the pump off and the room at 38. Instead, it was hovering in that middle range. Not warm like you or me, not cold like it should have been. That in-between is not supposed to exist after 15 hours. I pulled my hand back. The skin on my palm tingled. I looked down at her left hand. It rested near the edge of the sheet. Fingers slightly curled, nails pale under the prep room light. I needed to know if what I had seen earlier was my head or something else. So I decided to test it. You are not taught this in mortuary school. There is no chapter titled, "What to Do if the body answers back." This was just me in that room trying to get through the night. I stood where she could not fall if something went wrong. Feet shoulder-width apart on the rubber mat. Hands at my sides. "All right," I said quietly. "Let's see." I picked a simple pattern. Counting. We do it all the time when we time fluid flow. "On 3, I said. 1. Nothing moved. My voice sounded thinner than I wanted. 2. Still nothing. Just the lamp. Just the cooler. 3. On that word, her left index finger curled in toward her palm. Slow. Deliberate. Then the rest of the fingers followed, closing into a loose fist. I did not move. I watched, waited. After a few seconds, the hand relaxed again. Fingers uncurled halfway. They did not return to the exact same position. They stayed closer together. I felt my jaw clench before I realized I was doing it. I made myself let it go. "That could be spasm," I whispered. Even I did not believe it. I tried again. This time I did not say anything first. I just counted in my head and touched 2 pressure points. I put my right thumb against the radial side of her wrist. Left thumb at the base of the ring finger. 1, I said. Nothing. 2. The skin under my thumb felt like it tightened very slightly. A subtle flex. Tissue pushing back against my pressure. 3. Her fingers closed again. Right on that word, right on that beat. I took my hands away. The fingers slowly eased open. I should have stopped everything right there. Closed up, called the coroner. But I was trapped between what I knew and what I was allowed to admit. "This is not possible at 15 hours, I said. Not at this temperature. Not with this history. I reached for the overhead lamp handle and swung the beam across her face, just to check the sutures and the feature set. That is what I told myself. The light moved from left to right in a smooth arc. Her eyes were still filmed over pupils, wide, unresponsive. They should have looked fixed on nothing. As the light passed over them, the reflected catch in each cornea seemed to shift. Not just because the lamp moved. The reflection tracked toward the light by a fraction longer than it should have. Like the eyes were chasing the brightest point in the room. I stopped the lamp. The catch stayed in the new position. For a second, I thought maybe my own head was swimming. I took a breath. It hitched halfway down. I forced it the rest of the way. In this line of work, you lean on time and temperature. They are the only two things that do not lie. Until they do. I stepped away from the table and looked at the wall clock again. 2:43 a.m. I replayed the numbers in my head. Pronounced dead at 11:32 p.m., into the cooler at 1:10 a.m., onto my table at 2:47 a.m. 15 hours had passed between that amended time and my first incision. Even more by this point. Any reflex arcs should have been gone. Any stray electricity in the nervous system should have bled off a long time ago. If I wrote what I was seeing in the report, it meant more than one person had made a catastrophic mistake. The ER physician, the nurses who called time, the paramedics who rolled her in, even the coroner who signed off. In a place like this, in a city like Chattanooga, you do not throw that kind of accusation around lightly. We all work together too often. We share the same hallways and parking lots. I stood there between the table and the door and realized I was not just fighting with fear. I was fighting with the entire system that pays my mortgage. Another problem dug in right behind that thought. If I was wrong, if this really was some rare, late bizarre reflex, I would be the mortician who cried wolf on a dead woman. And that would follow me for the rest of my career. The air in the room felt different. Colder against the exposed skin above my mask. I looked at the wall thermometer again. It dipped one notch lower, 36 degrees now. My breath fogged in front of me in a faint cloud. I had never seen that in this room. I placed my hand on her forearm again. The skin did not match the air. Not cold, not warm. Just that wrong, in-between temperature that had no real category. Under my palm, the muscle did not feel slack. It felt engaged, like someone was there choosing to hold, not to move. The overhead lights, which usually flicker a little on night power, were rock steady now. No hum, no pulse. They burned constant and flat, wiping away any soft edge from the shadows in the corners. The metal frame of the table vibrated under my wrists in tiny pulses. I matched them in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On 7, the vibration peaked, then faded just like that tick had been doing. That rhythm had crawled into the bones of the building. I knew I should have shut it all down. Marked the case, called it in, but my hands did what they were trained to do. They finished the job. I rechecked the carotid site. No leaks, ligature secure. I finished the arterial injection by hand with a gravity assist bottle lowered to reduce pressure. I rotated her gently to work the lever and make sure distribution was even. Back, side, back again. Each movement got a little easier as the tissue softened. That softening should have been comforting. It was not. Her face looked better to a stranger by then. Color restored, features set. If you did not know the numbers, you would say she looked at peace. I knew too much to say that. I completed the cavity treatment exactly by the book. Trocar entry, quadrant pattern, volume appropriate for her size. No improvisation. My mind was not in that step. It was still back at her fingers and that tiny shift in her eyes. When I was done, I sutured every puncture site cleanly, washed the surface, dried and wrapped. I noted the time in my log. 3:21 a.m. I wrote nothing about movement, nothing about warmth, nothing about the tick. I signed my name and logged out of the prep room. That was my last solo night shift. I did not know it yet, but it was. A few months later, I asked to be moved to daytime cosmetic work. Hair, makeup, dressing. Work where the bodies feel more like objects and less like questions. I stayed in the same building here in Tennessee. I just stopped taking the keys to that room after dark. Years went by. I tried to put that night in the same box as the worst car wrecks, the drownings, the fire victims. Things you see, process, and stack in the back of your head so you can keep going. It did not stay in that box. One slow afternoon, the new kid at the desk was trying to learn the software. He called me over. "Hey, can you help me pull an old case?" He had the wrong screen open. Instead of a billing record, he had a scanned copy of a death packet. Her name was on it. "You meant to close this," I said. "Sorry," he said. I hit the wrong tag. I almost walked away. I should have walked away. Instead, I leaned in and read the handwritten notes on the physician's sheet. Time of collapse. Time EMS arrived. Time first rhythm check. There it was again. The original time of death crossed out. Below it, in a different pen, after 40 minutes of failed resuscitation and high-dose sedation, they had written the new time. The time I had been using in my head to make everything feel safe. When I lined up the earlier time with when I saw those movements, they fit each other uncomfortably well. The tissue changes, the warmth, the tear. All of it matched a point closer to that first set of numbers, not the corrected ones. I stood there longer than I should have. My teeth were together so hard my jaw hurt. "Everything okay?" the kid asked. "Yeah," I said. "Wrong file. Go ahead and close it. Go." I did not tell him why my hands were shaking a little. I never filed a complaint, never called the hospital, never asked the coroner what happened in that ER bay. Because to do that, I would have to put in writing what I thought had happened on my table in that prep room. And I still cannot say it in a way that fits any line on any form we use. Sometimes late at night, lying in my own bed, miles away from that building, I hear that same 7-second tick. There is no steel tray, no pump, no fluorescent light. Just my own pulse in my ears counting something down I do not want to define. I still don't know if I embalmed a dead woman that night or stopped a living one from ever trying to move again. If you're still here, thank you for staying with me through this. If stories from the night shift speak to you, tap like so I know you made it to the end. Share this video with someone who thinks they understand what happens behind these doors. And if you want to hear more cases I was never supposed to talk about, subscribe and stay close. But before you go, tell me in the comments, what do you think really happened that night?